So if you've been wondering lately, what happened to my sweet little toddler, this video is for you. There are 4 main reasons that toddlers, especially 2.5-year-olds to young 3-year-olds, can be a little challenging at times, and it's all completely developmentally normal. In fact, if you as a parent or a teacher didn't sometimes feel a little challenged by a 2-year-old's behavior, then you might ask, what's going on with my 2-year-old? Why are they completely easy and pliable and do whatever I ask 100% of the time? But if you're like a lot of parents and teachers, you might find the 2-year-old to a young 3-year-old stage a little challenging, and that's because there's 4 things going on developmentally that can make some of their behavior become more difficult to work with than when they were a live in the moment, go with the flow younger child. The first is at about 2.5 years of age, the child's imagination really takes off. You'll see them doing more pretend play, which is charming. They'll even start to invent little stories about things that didn't actually happen and share them with you. And usually, this type of imagination is applauded and encouraged. There's another side of imagination which should also be applauded and encouraged, but can be difficult to deal with, and that is that they can suddenly imagine countless alternatives to what they are currently doing, the couple choices of food that you're giving them. They can imagine endless varieties of other things to have, other things to do, and so that can lead to them, disagreeing with you when you, would like to have them put their shoes on. Suddenly they can think of 80 other things they would rather be doing rather than just being in the moment with you and putting their shoes on. Of course, once that imagination developing is perfectly natural and good that children are developing their imagination about this age. And one of the side effects is that they'll use that imagination to come up with other suggestions. And so that can make it seem like something's happened to your sweet little toddler. And it's because something did happen, their imaginations exploded. Change our approach with how we approach this new toddler with this wonderful imagination. Another appropriately developmental milestone that can be challenging to some people is that at about 2.5, the child has a fully developed will. You'll hear them before that using I and me and mine really appropriately, because they are fully understanding, fully aware that they are their own unique person, completely separate now from you, their parent, you, their teacher, you, their caretaker, and they want to exercise that will. And we want them to exercise that will so they can be citizens of a free democracy, right? And so they can think for themselves when they're a teenager and people offer them unsafe choices, and they can have their own free will and say, no, I'm going to decide differently even if you pressure me to. So we want that will to develop. And also it can be a little challenging when it does, because again, we just have to change our strategies, whereas when they were younger, it might have been easier to get a child to collaborate with you or to comply with things they don't have a choice about. Development of the will and imagination. Another change that's happening in the 2s, early 3s, is they're shifting from being a unconscious creator, which is the 0 to 3 child, where they're just creating themselves and they're just going around, touching, exploring, working, and they're moving into the second plane, the second half of the first plane of development, the 3 to 6-year-old child, who is conscious worker, and similar to, and because of that imagination developing, they start to kind of plan their activities more, not the way that adults do, but they'll come into the classroom and they'll think, I wanted to work with water today. They'll go over to where some of the water activities are. They'll choose that, or they'll think, I'm in the mood for books. So they kind of are in the mood for things and are consciously aware of what they're craving. And so when we interfere with whatever that plan is, along with that development of the will, there can be some conflict there. But moving into this phase of the conscious worker is very desirable. We want them to be able to think about what activities they would like to work with and plan and do those activities. They're not as just in the moment, like an 18-month-old who just walks in and just sees something interesting, touches it right away, and is more moving from activity to activity in a different, more spontaneous way than the 3 to 6-year-old child is. And so just like the imagination, just like the development of the will, interfering with a plan of something they want to work on, have their mind set on and interfering with that plan of work, there's a lot more energy around that than just redirecting a younger child who's just in the moment and more easily distracted. And so again, all good things, but all reasons where it can be hard at times to parent, and we just need to adjust the way we parent, the way we teach for this older toddler. And the fourth reason I'm going to talk about is that there's a huge explosion of language typically beginning at the age of 2. They have all these words, and they can say them all to you, and they can tell you, how they feel about everything. And it's not always good, I mean, they know what they want and they're able to share it now, and sometimes that's going to be a conflict. I can tell you whole sentences about why your plan to make them cream of wheat isn't their favorite plan, and argue with you. That communication piece is really important that they're developing. It's important that they're using their language to express their will, and again, to imagine alternative realities that they wish existed beyond that bowl of cream of wheat. And so vocabulary, again, wonderful. We're glad it's happening. And it's also another tool they can use to communicate with you, and it might not always be what you wanted to communicate, whereas before when they just had a couple words like, no, or no thank you. And oftentimes adults aren't as bothered by those simple, cute little sentences, but when they can string a bunch of words together, to tell you what they don't like, sometimes it can bother the adults a little more. So again, imagination, development of the will, increased vocabulary, and shifting into this conscious worker. All great things that are happening developmentally, all things we want to happen. So I'm just hoping that keeping these things in mind will help you a little bit with patience, and just help encourage you to remind yourself they're in a new stage and we have to adjust our parenting and how we're going to collaborate with them, how we're going to educate them, how we're going to help them to be free thinkers and yet still be respectful, and to have some videos that might help you with that. So go ahead and click on those, and I'll see you in the comments. Thanks for watching. Take care.